My name is Hurer bin Sohail. I am the managing editor for Inavate APAC, and I will be your moderator for today. Joining me is Eric Tanuijaja from Barco. We have Florence Chouette from Stephenson, Harwood. And we have Maureen Aw from PTS Consulting. The topic of discussion, guys, is building blocks of next generation meeting spaces. Now, we've received a lot of feedback post-pandemic from everyone, right? They're telling us what meeting rooms need to be. They need to be flexible, they need to be adaptable, they need to be hybrid, they need to be scalable, they need to be monitored and managed. We're getting a lot of feedback from end users, but I want to see how you guys are taking this feedback on and kind of conceptualizing what are the core building blocks for next generation meeting rooms. Eric, if you could start us off by answering this question.
Right, thanks, H. So Eric from Barco here, taking care of the meeting experience business here in Barco. So I'm glad you mentioned the word meeting space, H, because in the last 2 years, as I deep dive into this market of meeting experience, we realized that we should not use the word meeting room, because post-pandemic, everything revolves around the meeting experience itself. In fact, if you look at the demographic of the office space in the past 5 quarters, most of the office fit-out is decreasing the amount of personal workstation, but they invest more into the huddle space, meeting room that supports virtual conferencing and drive collaboration space. So I think it's apt word to use the word space rather than a room itself, because meeting should not be limited just by the 4 walls. So fundamentally, I believe the building blocks for the next gen meeting spaces should cater to end-to-end user experience. I'm quite sure all the panelists today will have some components in their pitch about the user experience. When I said user experience, it's not just about what technology you have in that meeting room, but how do we curate the experience for users across different stakeholders, functions, right? From the way we design the layout of the meeting rooms, the furniture that we fit into the meeting rooms, as well as even down to the acoustics or visual aids available in that room, because every meetings are different, right? So meetings can be short, can be long, some can be very sensitive if they cater to some of the trade information. You want to make sure that the room is quiet enough to make sure that no information is leaked up from that room. So there are different types of meetings catered for different purpose. So fundamentally, to curate a good user experience that is purpose-driven is the fundamentals, in my opinion. Second building blocks that I felt really important nowadays, especially when video conferencing is pretty much in our daily workflow, is to ensure there's a meeting equity in every meeting scenarios. So what do I mean by meeting equity, right? So how do we make sure that everyone is heard in that meeting? Be it you are the remote participants at the far end, or you are in that meeting space in your office. How do we make sure that everyone could share their opinion, everyone can be seen, and there's equal access to everybody to share their opinions in that meeting, right? So and given the fact that hybrid workplace is here to stay, right? So that meeting experience need to be consistent. So if you felt like you are able to speak up in that physical meeting space with your offline audience, it should not differ when you are running that meeting at a remote scenario, right? Be it on Zoom, on Teams. How do we make sure that that meeting equity exists in that meeting space is really important to drive the next gen meeting rooms. Yeah.
Maureen, Eric put forward UX and equity as kind of like 2 core building blocks. Do you want to expand on these 2 topics, or do you think that there is another core building block that should be added to the mix as well?
Yeah, I think it's a lot to unpack in this one question, for sure. As Eric was speaking, I was thinking about it. Definitely with working from home becoming acceptable, more widely accepted after the pandemic, video conferencing is definitely part of the building blocks. I mean, this, needless to say, we know how many video conferencing devices have been sold widely during the last 2 years because of this rise of people working remotely. And now that things are opening up, we are back in office, the fact is that what I always tell my client is to be mindful that you will always have a remote participant, even though you're in office these days. And it still remains the same. Even though 90% of the people may be in a meeting room, I would have one or two remotely somewhere else joining the meeting. So the building blocks of it, video conferencing is definitely one of them. And when you mentioned the term next gen meeting room, I'm thinking about the next generation of young people that are coming into the workforce. I mean, it is the truth. They are the next generation of the workforce in our market. And we all know that they live and breathe in the technology. You know, as parents out there will know how difficult it is to, you know, get them away from a device on hand. I think that is pretty prevalent. So they are more equipped than most of us these days. So what is it in the meeting spaces that is required for this newer generation? And in my opinion, consumer trend tend to take the lead, and then the commercial market will take after it. One example, just a simple one, your Siri, your Alexa, and whatnot. I'm sure everyone have been to a space whereby, you know, can we actually control the room with voice command? And I have been to hotels where they have Alexa in a space to control your lights, your music, your everything, right? The integration of all of this sort of newer technology in the space, it's something to be considered as well. But obviously, we're not catering only for one spectrum of the market. You gotta be mindful of, you know, the different level of technology experiences that people have in the organization. That's something to be mindful of. And then back to one of the other things that Eric pointed out, which is collaboration. I think that it's an equity, of course. I think that it's something to be mindful of as well, is that how many times were we in a physical meeting room and pointing on a whiteboard or on something, and then those of us sitting at home will be like just waiting in silence awkwardly and hoping someone is going to explain what exactly is happening in the meeting room. I think every one of us face something like that. And of course, with the improvement in technology, the advance in technology of, like, you know, camera whiteboards or interactive display that you can share remotely with annotation and whatnot, that has definitely helped as well. And how do we ensure that same experience, that whether you're at home or you are physically in the meeting room, you get the same level of experience and you don't miss out the body language, the unspoken cues and whatnot that you would have caught if you're in the meeting room. I think these are points that I like to share.
Florence, your thoughts?
So yeah, like on my part, like there's like one more thing that I want to add. When you work for a law firm, you will have to deal with people that are like from different industry, like from government side and everything. So when you build your meeting room, you need to make sure they're compatible with a maximum of technology. Because if your meeting room can do only Teams, most likely your partner, like the one who brings the money to the firm, will not be happy because they will not be able to meet their client that are overseas. Because like with COVID, clients don't need to come to the office. So we need to really make sure that everybody can like interact with us, no matter like what technology they use, what technology we use. So we need to be like, yeah, the most compatible possible. And we need also like, because in luxury brand and also in a law firm, people are not really good with technology. So we need to make sure that it's easy to use, easy to understand, and like they don't have to think. They are already stressed about their meeting. So we need to make sure that for them, everything is smooth. So this is the last part that, like, on top of what Maureen and Eric shared, that I want to add.
Really interesting feedback. And I kind of want to start linking these building blocks that you guys have presented to creating these building blocks in meeting spaces. And that's obviously done through technology. Maureen, you brought up next generation and the fact that we have these people who are joining the workforce and will continue to join the workforce. And they're really, really, really familiar with technology, but it's consumer technology. It's not AV technology per se, but it's things like the laptop, the iPad, the tablets, the phones that they have in their pockets, right? Do you think that these consumer devices need to be considered very heavily and brought into the fold for meeting space technology systems?
Yeah, a very good question. I get that a lot all the time. And as a consultant, right, your clients would come to me saying that I can already wirelessly cast my content onto my home TV. You mean I can't do that in the office? And that sets the expectation. Like that's what I was talking about, consumer trend taking the lead, right? People are so familiar with their phones, even young kids don't need to be taught how to use them. And in our meeting spaces these days, the integration of using your phone to check into meeting rooms, using your phones to control the audiovisual equipments in a room, I think that has become, a blend into the space. So is it a necessary to consider? For sure, it has to be, but up to what level? So for example, when I was talking about voice command and control, is that something we have seen a lot being deployed in the meeting room spaces yet? I think that it is not as widely spread at the moment because of accent, because of certain limitations that's still in the process of fine-tuning. But I believe we will be there one day for sure, right? Technology is catching up so quickly, right? What is ChatGPT doing there? So I'm sure it will catch up, and when people have that at their home and using that on a daily basis, when they get into a workplace, they would expect the same, at least the same level of technology that they can experience as compared to at home. I believe a lot of us have heard, my home setup is much better than office. And then what actually draws them back into the space? So that was it's definitely something that we do have to consider.
Florence, you mentioned being platform agnostic is something that's very important to you, right? How do you make meeting spaces platform agnostic? What are you guys doing at Stephenson Harwood to kind of get these meeting spaces to that point where anything can be used, any VC platform can be used without any problems?
So like the thing that my workplace manager decided is to check which device on the market can answer most of the question. We cannot fully comply, but we have some device that can really fulfill 80 up to 90% of our needs. So for example, in my firm, we choose to go to Neatboard because Neatboard is Zoom, it's Teams, it's almost everything. And even if you cannot use Zoom or Teams, you can also use the HDMI and the USB-C port to enable the Neatboard as an external camera and everything. So we still have ways to use the different other platform, because when you deal with with the High Court in Hong Kong, I can tell you the Hong Kong government is definitely not up to date. So we need to use really ancient video conferencing things. But when you deal with the US court, they were way more advanced. So you need to be up to all the level. So for now, what is responding to our needs is neat. But in LVMH, we were more on the Zoom side with all the Logitech camera and everything, because Logitech is Teams and Zoom, because this is the two most wide conferencing technology used. So it's depend of what is the needs of the company. LVMH didn't really face outside people. It's more people coming to us. So they need to comply to us. But in Stephenson Harwood, we need to comply to people outside. So that's why the technology that we use is different.
Eric, some really good feedback from both Maureen and Florence, right? Maureen's talking about bringing in user devices and making sure that we cater to how the users, the new users, right? The next generation is behaving. And then there's Florence who's talking about this requirement for being platform agnostic based on their specific needs. You're responsible, right? Barco is responsible for building the technology. What have you got for them?
Yeah, so I'm very happy to hear all these feedbacks from Maureen and Florence. because in our day-to-day, when we actually interface with the customers on the field, these are some of the common trends that is really developing in the market, right? So let's visit one by one. So Maureen mentioned about the consumer experience, right? Because with the advance of like your iPhones, your Microsoft devices, everything tend to be wireless, right? Your AirPlay, whatsoever. And when we bring this technology from the consumer space to the enterprise space, I think what Barco did is, I mean, we did all the heavy lifting, because when that technology crossed to the enterprise usage, it's a whole new equations, because we need to take care of the security elements, right? We need to make sure that the user experience remain the same, while we have to cater to all these personal data protection. Let me quote an example, right? For example, if you use your wireless devices at home, it's within your own network, right? It's your own personal devices, so there is a very minimal requirements for security, right? But when you are in enterprise use case, right, your guests might come in to use your solution. Your external, your internet stakeholders might share some sensitive information. It can be healthcare records of a patient. It can be a financial data of a VIP customers in a bank. But how do we make sure those information contained within the enterprise, right? And yet being able to do things wirelessly. So I think that's where Barco really value add into the meeting experience, right? Because first we make it wireless. Maureen mentioned about the next gen workforce. I can assure you, the word wireless is very strongly attached to the mindset, right? They are using wireless mouse and keyboard. They are no longer using wired phones. Everything almost wireless in their life. So when they come to the office, the expectation is that I thought everything should be wireless, right? I think that is a real thing, a real feedback on the field that we always get. And now let's revisit what Florence said about agnostics, right? I think this is again a key, because there are so many brands out there in the last 2 years that fit into this video conferencing market, right? Maureen mentioned about Logitech, Neatbot. If you flash back to just before COVID, 2.5 years ago, there's pretty much very limited options for video conferencing use case, right? But in the last 2 years, a lot of manufacturers, a lot of technology company actually built a very useful technology, right? But how do we make sure that all these technology can remain relevant to every single meeting experience? I think that's where ClickShare really come in, because the way we value add to the meeting experience across verticals in the corporate settings is we try to be agnostics. First, we try to be agnostic in terms of the video conferencing platform you're using. It doesn't matter today, you might be using Zoom or Teams. We could actually translate that experience from your personal device into a meeting room systems. We also agnostic in terms of the equipment that you're using. It doesn't matter if you're using a Windows device, MacBook, iOS, macOS, you could connect to the meeting room wirelessly, right? And that actually is the backbone of how we want to make sure we could elevate the meeting experience, because you could bring in your own device into the meeting room. If you want to collaborate with one another, you can use your own device and seamlessly share that digital information across without any hurdle, right? And to bring that experience to even further level, right? What we do, which we launched ISE this year, how could we bring those more equity into those experience? So I just like to briefly highlight. So on top of bringing your own device, on top of making sure that we are agnostic across different vendors and solutions, we want to make sure how could we bring those experience that you have from your physical offline meetings to virtual meetings. So this year we introduced the support for dual display. So that's our CX50 Gen 2, where you could allow, using your own personal device running Microsoft Teams or Zoom, you could bring two different content into the screen. So one can be the PowerPoint presentation that you bring up to share across your video conferencing call, but at the same time, we can bring up a people view on the other screen. Because I think Maureen mentioned about the able to bring in the nuances of the meeting, right? Facial expression, body language, which we believe this is the real game changer. Because imagine this, you have to run a virtual call for over 3 hours across like maybe town hall settings or workshop. But when you don't have the visibility into those people that you interact with over the virtual world, it's very painful for the presenter, because they do not know what are the participants are reacting. They can't see the facial expression. They can't really engage with them through the body language. So we think this is one pinpoint that we like to resolve with our next generation of ClickShare. So all in all, I think the technology for video conferencing is evolving, right? We will see not just from Barco ClickShare, we see a lot of manufacturers is working very hard to bring in all these meeting equities elements into the meeting space in the virtual world to make sure that everybody can be seen, everybody can be heard. Even like a simple like whiteboard tools, right? An extra camera to point to another whiteboard and bring that information across to the digital space. That's fantastic, and we're gonna see more evolution in this space, I believe, in terms of the technology for the next gen meeting space.
Maureen, I just want to encapsulate all the conversation we've been having and kind of pose a question to you about where the market is heading. Through the pandemic, we saw Teams rooms, Zoom rooms become very popular. And one of the main reasons was experience, right? You could get that one-touch meeting start, no problems. You don't need to bring a phone. You don't need to bring a laptop, nothing. You just enter, you press the button, and you're into your meeting, right? And then as the requirements for, hey, I just don't need a Teams room, I need Zoom, I need to support multiple different platforms, right? We started seeing BYOD and then the BYOM, bring your own meeting, right? Which is where the device, the user's device, serves as the center point for the VC experience. They started to make a comeback, right? And we started to see this shift from dedicated VC spaces, which have a very easy to use experience, more towards, you know, things like, hey, it's BYOM. We understand that the user, we're relying on the expertise of the user to be able to use their laptop. What kind of feedback are you getting from your clients when they're asking you to design meeting spaces? Do you think like BYOD is back up on the rise, BYOM, or do you think the dedicated Teams room, Zoom room thing is still going to continue?
Yeah, I think this very much goes back to the requirements, user requirements, organization behavior. So it revolves around people, I'd say. So like as much as I'm a technology consultant, as I like to say, it's still the people that matters. It's how the people are using it and why do they need it. Every organization is different. There isn't a one size fit all solution that we can cut across, you know, all clients. Because, you know, be it the standards of, is it a Zoom room or a Teams room, or a multi-platform support, like what Florence was talking about, being a platform agnostic. I think that varies across, and obviously our solution will have to be catered accordingly on that basis. But I think apart from the platform itself, the other thing that in my humble opinion, is that people's expectations of meeting room have increased over, you know, the pandemic. And the reason for that, I like to think, is because over the last 2.5 years or so, we are getting very personalized experience at home. You know, I get a headshot of everyone in front of me, very sharp, you know. Unlike in a meeting room, I get 10 heads and I can't even see them. You know, obviously technology improved. We have got one camera being able to take headshots of the participants in there, be able to transit smoothly across the different cameras, but also acoustically. Like right now, I have a microphone that's close to me and you're getting good quality audio. But in a meeting room that's large, if I only have got one microphone in the space trying to pick up from, you know, 10, 20 voices, and if the acoustics of the room is not well done, it's gonna be tough to try to even understand. I'm sure the term Zoom fatigue isn't unfamiliar with us. And why so? Because during the pandemic, we were all having back-to-back calls. There isn't buffer time, or there isn't a need for buffer time between meetings because you are just a click away from your next call or your next meeting. But now that we are back in office, and if the quality of the audio, for example, is still bad, people lose patience trying to understand what you're trying to say. You know, you just lose the attention, lose your focus, and it's not a quality meeting anymore. It's sort of a waste of everybody's time in that sense. So it's a lot of different components that add up to it. And I feel like it's because subconsciously our expectation of meeting have changed over the last 2-3 years. Now that when we are back in office, we're expecting the same level that we're experiencing at home. And hence we get, as consultant, I get a lot of comments whereby, oh, but my setup at home is much better. Like, why do I want to come back, right? I get so much more personalized experience. And you know, all these are points of consideration. There's so much more to add. But yeah, I'll stop here for now.
Florence, there's a question about security, right? And I want to direct it over to you, right? Obviously, as a law firm, you have one of the most stringent requirements for security. And when you're going BYOD or when you're going wireless, that is providing access to your IT infrastructure to a party, and then all the questions of can we trust them, yada, 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 they start popping up. I know it's very difficult to sometimes add a new wireless access point into an existing system as well. So when it comes to evaluating these products that are going to enable wireless connectivity, right, and enable BYOD, what are some of the first security concerns that run through your mind? Like, what's the first checklist they need to make?
So first of all, BYOD from all user is a big no-no in our firm. So if you join a meeting for the firm, it will be with device provided by the firm. So like this is the first part, is like when it's something organized by us, with only us, it will be like only like things belonging to the firm to mitigate any issue. But when it's user like coming to like client coming to our office who wants to connect, we decided to segregate some meeting rooms that are not on the same network as the firm, just to like lower the risk and make sure that like we are like safe for our client information. So like the client will have like Wi-Fi, we'll be able to connect to like our meeting room to do everything he wants, but like it will be like totally segregated. So like this is the two way we do actually. But like I know that in our headquarters, like they are looking for new solution, because like it's starting to be like also like a need from our partner to be able to use only one phone instead of like the personal phone and the firm phone. So like it's not like to be like a bit complicated for us. And our information security is really strict, because we manipulate too many information that are like confidential, that are not able to be, we need to make sure that they are not leaked. And on top we have like certified ISO, so like 100,000, I don't remember the number, but like we have a certification, so we need to uphold to all the standards. So like this is a real complicated situation for us. And for now we decide like when the user complaint is not the same as at home, and we are like at home, if you lose your password, if you have your bill on the table, it's your problem. But like if anything is leaking from our firm, we will be liable, and we cannot allow that. So our user has a less high expectation than when they are at home because of this security issue. So yeah, basically like this is, we segregate as much as we can.
Yeah, of course, like you should, especially considering that you're an law firm. Eric, Florence kind of highlighted some ways that they protect themselves, right? Which is separate networks, right? Not connected, managing devices, all of that stuff. But she also brought up ISO certification. Could you maybe expand a little bit on the security that Barco's BYOD and ClickShare platform provide, and are they up to scratch to what the market is demanding?
Yes, certainly. So ClickShare has been around for more than 10 years. In fact, this is our 11th year in the market. In essence, we are actually born out of enterprise need. So let me highlight in terms of the our approach to address the security and data integrity in enterprise environment. So one and foremost, I think Florence did mention about the ISO certification. I think this is like the bare minimum required if you want to be treated as a serious vendor that want to discuss about security. So all the ClickShare devices is ISO certified. To be exact, is ISO 27K range. So that ISO govern the data security, information security management, that ensure that the device that is installed in every enterprise are validated, that they are secure. There's an encryption to a certain level that will be able to protect data from leaking out or anybody to copy those data. So that's one. We also actively do a penetration test. So in the market, if you want to be always making sure that your device is hacker proof, we always invite hackers to try to penetrate into our system, right? So that is one way we actually approach this issue. So to make sure that we are up to date in terms of how hackers have been involved in terms of their skill set and the way they try to penetrate into a IT system. And also not to mention we have a full force R&D is working on to standards. So for every standards in terms of the wireless, we will always be on par down to the encryption, right? So we are using the AES encryption standard and whatnot. So whenever there's a new encryption standard in the market that we could apply for our wireless technology, we'll do it. Yeah. And of course, not many people know, but ClickShare behaves like a smartphone. Every quarter, there are always firmware updates to make sure that there's a latest firmware being pushed down to every single unit that's connected to the network to make sure that there's a peace of mind for the IT team, there's a peace of mind for the end users across different use case, right? It can be from governments, can be healthcare, financial, those where data is treated really seriously, they are covered. Yeah, so that's how ClickShare, the way we do it to address the security component of our solutions.
I hope that answers the question that we received from the audience. The last big topic I kind of want to discuss with our panelists today is, Eric at the start said we shouldn't call them meeting rooms, we should call them meeting spaces. And one of the reasons for that is that technology is now going everywhere, right? Like previously it used to be contained very nicely in a shiny meeting room. And now it's like, it's in the meeting room, it's in the huddle room, it's in a phone booth, it's in a boardroom, it's even, I've seen some projects where they're even bringing it into open collaboration areas, right? So the question now becomes, there's so much more technology being put in, spaces are becoming technology dense, right? And that kind of increases the burden on IT teams and facility management teams, right? Florence, what's the workload been like? Is it increasing? Is it still manageable? Do you need any assistance?
So our awareness now is manageable because after like almost 3 years of COVID, especially like Hong Kong has been closed for so long, so we couldn't travel. So we had like really to like make sure that all our meeting area like are compatible with online. So 2020 has been the hardest year because we went from like really old hardware that like were like Cisco WebEx, all these kind of things were like really difficult to manage, to upgrade to like a new generation with all the Zoom and the Teams embedded. So like 2020 and 2021 was the 2 year like I was overwhelmed. I had to like have contractor like to help me because like I had to refurnish like a full meeting space with like 6 rooms that can combine together, that can be by 2, by 3. So like you need like, depending on the way you put your meeting room, you need to have the same experience. This is a small one. If it's the town hall, is it the same experience? So like at that time it was really hard. Now, like since we have something pretty stable, we just need to make sure that we upgrade year after year to make sure that the user experience stay the same. Because once you refurnish everything, is all shiny and everything, but after 2 years, you are like, oh, we need to upgrade to have something better because like there's something better on the market. So like, for example, with LVMH, like we were using ClickShare a lot and everything. And when I went to my new firm, I was like, oh yeah, like you can use that, like it was good. And then like InfoSec was like, oh la la, wait, we didn't vet them yet. And I'm like, oh, okay. So like we are reviewing this kind of stuff, but like it's just like need to upgrade, and the constant upgrade like is less burdensome than like when we need to install at the beginning. So since like we got rid of all the old stuff, now it's better. And the technology is easier. So now we can include the admin officer into the loop. So they know how to set up the meeting or to join the Teams meeting and the Zoom, because it's really easy. You just need to click one point and everything. So IT can be like a bit step back and we are just there in case of emergency. But for all the setup, our admin officer are like pretty much like independent, because we have so many meetings in the law firm that we cannot keep up anyway in IT.
Maureen, I think one of the reasons 2020 and 2021 was perhaps so bad was because no one was prepared for it, right? But now we've been through the worst of it and we can kind of start game planning. What are you recommending to your clients when you're designing meeting spaces and workspaces? Are you having this conversation about, hey, you need to figure out a way on how your team is actually going to operate and maintain these systems as well?
Yeah, I think like I mentioned, it's back to people, right? And how is the space going to be utilized? Some companies mandate like a 2-day week, 3-day week. And to be fair, a lot of companies are moving to its activity-based working instead of a fixed desk, convert some of the other spaces to wellness space, sociable space, collaboration space, whatever you term it to be, right? But just not desk, just not fixed desk. And as part of that, a lot of sensors are being put into buildings, into desks, where FMs kind of monitor it through a different platform or a single platform in that sense, whereby how much is space being utilized? Is it more on certain days? How would we then, manage the space and whatnot? Just linking back to what Florence was talking about in terms of managing the spaces, even integration with your building management systems, smart building platforms, that it's people want to operate it on one single dashboard and not having to flip through 10 different applications to monitor 10 different stuff, and reducing the workload by having proactive sort of monitoring or preventive maintenance as such, to sort of reduce the workload on FMs in general. I think that has been quite a bit of a game changer. Like we all say, technology has escalated over the last 2-3 years for all of those reasons that we're talking about. So yeah.
Eric, obviously, ClickShare out in at an installation or a deployment or a workspace, what kind of management and monitoring does ClickShare bring to the table?
So again, I totally agree with what Florence and Maureen has shared in the past few minutes. The 2020 and 2020 to 2021 was the hectic period for all IT managers that I know. They have to mass deploy hundreds or not thousands of video conferencing capability, not just on the meeting rooms, but across all the personal workstations, your laptop, your mobile devices, across all individuals, right? But I just like to highlight in terms of meeting spaces, right? So ClickShare is not just a simple audio-visual equipment for you to share content or join call remotely to get all the camera signaling to your personal laptop. It's actually a IT network device as well. Having said that, when you have a device being able to hook up to the network, you could manage them remotely, right? So I hear the keyword like dashboard, a singular workflow to manage all the assets that you have. The way Barco execute that, we actually offer a cloud management platform to manage all this. We coin it XMS tool. So it's called Cloud XMS. So basically, it is like a cloud-based, web-based tool where you could actually manage your whole fleet of devices. This is in particular useful for enterprise that have a lot of meeting rooms with all different equipments. Through Cloud XMS, we could actually, from the moment, we can actually do end-to-end for the deployment, for the management monitoring, or even taking those data insights, because I think, I'm not sure who said that, I think Florence or Maureen mentioned something about the utilizations. Because actually in the last 2 years, this was a hot topic, right? So IT managers, FM, they want to know, how are my meeting rooms being utilized? Am I over investing? Are there meeting rooms that are not being utilized? So those data points are crucial, because when they plan for the office expansions, those data could be their source of truth. So that actually implemented in XMS as well. So at Barco ClickShare, we understand that. We understand this is the real need. These are the important factors for companies, enterprises to drive a meaningful investment to their meeting spaces. So we actually built that capability into our XMS as well. We're actually able to monitor down to the month, day, hours of utilizations per meeting room. So that in turn can give some good insights for the management team, including FM, right? And of course, when it comes to remote deployment, you could use the solution that easily able to monitor your devices, whether they are running well, are they, I mean, basically health check, or if I want to push down a new firmware, could I do it remotely? And could I know what kind of system connected in that meeting room to click share? We could actually do that. So in essence, I think when you have a large management of meeting rooms, meeting spaces required across different equipments, we get it covered using our ClickShare XMS tool.
Awesome. I'm going to open the floor up to questions from our audience. And we already have some questions that have been shot across. Panelists, in order to just get through as many of these as possible, just try and keep your answers short and snappy. The first question I want to put forward is actually showcasing that our audience is very smart and they seem to know what's going on. They're saying that video conferencing is new, right? A camera, a screen, a processor, an audio input device, an audio output device, you're done. They're asking, what are the advances that are being made on the experience side, especially in terms of making it a bit more immersive and making it a bit more interactive? Maureen, this kind of fits into your whole thing about, hey, you need to consider the remote location. You need to consider the remote location. So what are some avenues of exploration to make these meetings more immersive and more interactive?
Yeah, that's a good question because I get it quite a bit as well. The truth is that, yeah, we do have video conferencing pre-pandemic that didn't change. So how is it changing, post-pandemic or wherever we are right now? The thing is, yeah, like I mentioned about how the experience, user experience have sort of expectation have risen subconsciously earlier. And there's still some part of technology but I feel it's a little bit of a gap. For example, when I talk about transition between cameras, I tend to miss the first 2 seconds or 3 seconds, whereby someone could be giving a death stare or have that look that I missed, or that the camera just wasn't zoomed in at that point. It was doing the transition, or audio not picking up the first 2 seconds when there was a cut in and whatnot. So these are parts of the experience which I feel needs to be elevated. It's all the nuances, but it's always the details that's the killer, isn't it? That makes the difference in there. And I feel like if we can get that level of equity to a level whereby we are comfortable and saying, even if I'm remote, I feel like I'm exactly in the meeting room, then I think we achieved it.
Eric, you kind of touched on the new features of the ClickShare, which are in line with these goals, right? Like achieving better equity, achieving better interactivity. For the audience, could you just give us a quick recap of some of the things that they can expect from the ClickShare platform?
Right. I think I'll just focus on the visuals. I think these attendees were mentioning about flat panel display already existed. So if you look at the trend, if you look at the dedicated appliance mode, even back to the Cisco days where they have like this telepresence, life-size pictures, those technology are not new, but we are bringing those into more mass market, which is BYOD, right? You do not need to have a dedicated investment that room to have that good visuals of people content. We could actually bring that for everybody that's using their own PC to run meetings. So that's one. And also, I think I like to give some insight to the trends. If you are following those Microsoft Teams news, in particular, Microsoft Teams Room, they actually have this form factor of 32:9 aspect ratio, 21:9 aspect ratio to actually deliver more immersive experience. So I think there are more technologies out there that will cater to this space to provide more immersive experience. And not just Microsoft, not just ClickShare, we are going to see more players coming to this space to offer more immersive experience.
Yeah, awesome. Florence, a question for you. It's actually for the panel, but you can kick us off. Who should take ownership of the user experience? Which is a very kind of loaded question because you're the user, but you don't have the full picture, right? Like you need all these other people to come together. But I think it's more a question towards who's driving it. Like, does it change every time from project to project, or do you feel that no, it should be driven by the kind of person who is going to be using?
So it's depend on the situation. For example, in office that is already stated, like the current office in Hong Kong, this is IT because we are the one who get all the feedback from our users. So when they go in a meeting and the meeting is not smooth, first thing they will do, they will call IT, like, oh, my meeting was not going well, you need to fix it, you need to fix it. And then we will do the testing, and then we will go like to the process to maybe upgrade or change or giving advice to the user. But when we have a brand new office, like is the case in Singapore, we are like building our new office right now, it will be driven by the facility managers. So like it's not IT. IT will go in and say like we have that in place and maybe we can lift and move. But like then the facility manager will meet all the key leaders of our firm and say, okay, like we have a new office, we can build this, this, and this. What do you need for the meeting space? Like, and then it will be them kicking the project. So it's really like depending on which part, like, yeah.
Maureen, once upon a time, consultancy might just have been doing a site survey and figuring out what the dimensions of the rooms are and what the materials are being used, and then just sitting at home and doing kind of like a design, right? Now I think it's all workshops, discovery sessions, interfacing directly with the clients. Do you think that that's helping you guys create like better user experiences? Yeah.
So answering the question, who is responsible for the user experience? It's a very smart question. I like our audience today. Everyone plays a part. I agree with whatever that Florence mentioned earlier, but it's also the responsibility of consultants to sort of educate, be it the users, be it the FMs, be it the IT managers, everyone. Given the amount of project we are exposed to, I mean, IT managers have their day-to-day job, you know, facility manager have their day-to-day jobs, and they only look at certain aspect of things. But given the exposure that we have as consultants, I think it's our responsibility to educate what's out there in the market, where the trend is heading to, like what Eric was mentioning earlier. And one other thing is, like you mentioned about workshop engagement, because what is the pain point that currently people are trying or are facing that we want to avoid? There's no point in putting the best technology in the whole wide world when it's not even part of the user workflow or the organization workflow. You put in there and it's not used, and what's the point? So whenever we engage clients, are there any existing issues that you want to try to resolve as the primary sort of questions? There is a client that I have, and it has a very particular workflow, which is like, why would you not do it in an alternative way that totally, you know, eliminate this issue altogether? But no, it's just not possible. It's part of the organization culture and workflow, and hence they're coming to us, say, do you have a solution for it? So that's why I feel like every person plays a part in this whole ecosystem. It's not just one person's responsibility in there.
Eric, a quick question back to monitoring and management. We see facility managers and IT managers end up with like lots and lots and lots of different window panes now, right? Like they've got one kind of platform to manage something, another platform to manage something else. The question is more about integration with BMS systems for XMS and how that kind of works. Could you expand a bit more on how XMS can fit inside an existing kind of like facilities management platform and how it can kind of like add on to that and provide some extra value?
Yeah, I think Maureen touched on this a little bit earlier. Like, no IT managers want to work with like 5 different dashboards to manage the whole assets they have, right? So we understand that pain point as well. So we actually able to release our XMS API to some of the BMS workflow management in the company. So, for example, I think the recent encounter from my own will be like Utology, right? You can actually bring XMS functionality into like this common dashboard to manage the whole facilities that we can do. But on the granular level, what we are trying to do as well, to make sure that if we can have a way to manage the room AV system, including the cameras, the speakers, the display that's connected to our base unit, we could try to manage that as well. Because these devices are connected via the USB, we will be able to do some data transfer. So I'm not sure whether you know or not, you could actually update your Logitech devices, selected models. You could update the Logitech firmware if they are connected to Barco ClickShare over the network. So you don't have to manage 2 different systems to manage Logitech camera and ClickShare devices. So that's something that we are working on to help IT managers to manage all these different fleet of devices.
There are a lot of technical questions that are popping up in chat. They're all the way from licenses to can I get a HDMI pass-through to can you tell me how many connections can be made at the same time, right? I think the Barco representatives are doing a good job answering them in chat. So we're going to leave it at that. And in case one of the Barco representatives wants to share their email ID in chat so that they can reach out to you guys later, that is also something that is doable, but Barco can reach out to you at a later date as well. And you can always reach out to me and I can put you in touch with the relevant Barco people. The last question I want to ask, and this is a question from my side, and it's a kind of like a question I always ask, is that investment in technology needs to have ROI, right? Like it needs to return something. And sometimes, right, like let's say, for example, you invested in meeting rooms and meeting spaces before the pandemic. And now all of a sudden the pandemic happened and now it's hybrid work and you can't go back and rip everything out and do everything from scratch, right? You've already invested money. Maureen, if this kind of problem kind of came across your desk and you were like, hey, I need to make this into a hybrid working space, but don't really have the budget to take everything out, how would you kind of tackle this hypothetical?
Interesting. Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah,
I think we just
I'm
gotta, yeah, and I've seen spaces whereby they just go ahead without us and it turns out horrible. But in any case, I always feel like break it down into what's essential, what's day one and what's day two, if it's a budget constraint, right? Where every organization starting point is different. So where are you right now and where are you trying to get to? I think a lot of organizations have sort of got a quick and easy, quote unquote, quick and dirty solutions during the 2 year to roll out something quick so that, you know, life can continue, meeting can carry on, stuff like that. But if we're talking about proper rollout of the space, now that, you know, we are getting a different phase after the pandemic, then it needs to be assessed in a way whereby where is the endpoint that we're getting into and how do we break it down into what's, say, fundamentals as day one and then what's next if it's a cost constraint. Yeah.
We have a question from chat directed towards Florence and Maureen. Florence, when is Stephenson and Harwood going to implement voice control? Is Siri ready to be implemented at a law firm with all your really strict requirements?
No, like it's not in the plan yet. This is my honest answer.
Maureen, any clients coming forward going like, hey, we want everything to be voice activated? Is it getting to that stage or are we still really far away from that?
I think I haven't get specifically requests for voice control. I think we know because in Singapore of our accent, hey, the Siri might not be as clever or smart at this point in time. But definitely a lot of sort of the more high-tech requests have been coming in like, oh, can we have metaverse in our workplace? Can we have VR, AR, everything, all the R's in the workplace if possible. But yeah, getting there slowly.
Richard, just to also answer this from my perspective, I think voice control or voice activated commands are going to become a thing once the voice assistants become better, right? We've already touched on the fact that they need to do better when it comes to accents and dialects. And obviously it needs to also expand out of English as the primary mode of communication towards more localized languages for the users across the globe. That's one thing. And number two, I think it's going to happen when the generation after Gen Z just uses voice control for everything, right? Once the consumer is using voice tech, it's all like, we're going to have to support it, right? Like it happened with USB, it happened with HDMI, it always happens that way. With that, I'm going to bring a close to our discussion. To our audience, thank you so much for joining. I will be sharing some additional resources on screen that you guys can access if you want more information. Obviously, the Barco team will continue to be in chat to kind of connect with you guys if you want. And I will also be bringing up the survey that you can enter to get 2 Google Nest Hubs, right? And those are going to be selected via lucky draw. Panelists, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and opinions. It was really informative for me. I hope it was informative for our audience as well. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hish. Thank you, everyone.